call this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Authority to order. Next item on our agenda is the roll call.
Cleary, Sierra, Garcia, Sierra, Hamilton, here. Hardy, Maldonado, Potts,
Here.
Udall.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. These are the minutes from the June 29th, 2023 meeting. The original minutes sent out and then a revised version was sent out a couple of days ago. That should have been emailed to you. Okay, we have a motion by Dan and a second by Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Item number 4 is public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't believe we have anybody in the chambers on a non-agenda item. Did anyone register? Nope. I don't see anyone online. We'll move on to item number 5, the Dane Buy Local program with Megan Stern. And Mike, if you or Joyce will give you just a quick introduction.
So we met Megan at the Fitchburg Chamber luncheon, and we kept in touch, and she wanted to come out and just talk about ways that CETA and the city could partner with Dane Buy Local. So take it away, Megan.
All right, I feel much more prepared now. Okay. All right, present. Full screen. Okay. So as Joyce said, and she's familiar with who we are, you're members of Dane Buy Local, so I'm imagining you're also familiar with what Dane Buy Local is, but I never assume that because it gets redundant, the images get redundant. So I first was just going to recap what Dane Buy Local is. And so my name is Megan, and I work as the development specialist for Dane Buy Local. Our executive director is Colin Murray, and he's been there for several years. He has, in the last 2 to 4 years, had to step slowly back out of being in this kind of position where he goes out and speaks to people due to some health concerns, and also the distribution of the mass amounts of money, federal money for the COVID. So this has been a time where I was brought on to do more of the membership, direct to membership work. So our main focuses are right here is education. I don't know if you're familiar, this is Keena Atkinson on the left here, doing a presentation at one of our leadership summit we had. We promote our businesses as much as we can. This is the opening ribbon cutting of Mentoring Positives on the east side. We collaborate a lot. This is us at the Capitol with Healthy Foods for All in schools. And then one-on-one support. Actually, this is an intern of ours, a high school intern, who was interviewing one of our members. And our catch has always been when we think, we all win when we think local first. All right, so right side doesn't matter as much. Left side, there's all our contact information. I'm also gonna be presenting on Dane County Food Collective today. And I wanted to include the fact that we used to be part of a larger group called Amoeba, which is a national organization. All other buy local businesses around the country, and that has been dissolving. So we are now part of what's called a Local Business Institute. And that's where we get a lot of our facts and figures and research and tools from when we need them, but it keeps us in an identity with whatever else is going on in the country around buy local organizations. So if you're not familiar, Dane Buy Local is not its own, a unique thing necessarily. They're all over the country. There's not a lot of them anymore because they've dissolved and fallen apart as the economy has changed. So our mission, I don't need to read it all through to you. It's pretty evident, I feel like, but our mission is to educate the public first of all about what it means to buy local first. Then we support our local businesses to grow and prosper. We are partners with almost all the local chambers, but our mission is slightly different in that the goal is not to bring new business necessarily to wherever we're at. It's to encourage businesses to keep moving forward. And our focus since COVID has been when there's barriers, we want our businesses to reach out to us and be able to say, I don't know what to do, I don't know where I'm going, and that's the resources where we provide the network, we provide the resources, whether that's a one-on-one opportunity, or if it's referring them to a large organization or a chamber, whatever it needs to be. Currently, we are at about 600 members, and that's pretty common for us. We've gone back and forth between 400 and 800, depending on how the economy is going. COVID was a huge flux for us, because when the economy gets more poor, it's not doing as well, people are desperate to find outreach. How do I make this work? How can I connect? So we had a big rise, and so we're just kind of in a nice even spot right now. It's manageable, which is good. And then the Dane County Food Collective. So first of all, do you have any questions about Dane by Local? We have our monthly breakfasts. Anyone from the community is open to come. So there's always a speaker, which is always dictated by a member in our organization who is like, I really would like to know more about, like one of our most recent ones was AI. Is this actually an efficient thing for me? I don't even know what it is. How do I suddenly learn how to do it and will it make my business more efficient? So we focus on finding somebody in our membership that has that skill set. They present. We also do like the one-on-ones, we do events, that sort of thing. So the Dane County Food Collective enters, I guess I didn't leave you an opportunity. Do you have questions on what Dane by Local is? Or online? Anyone? No? All right, thank you. Of our 600 members, over a third of them are in the food systems. And that could mean restaurants, farms, grocery stores, distributors. And this is a real significant need in our community, and the reason mostly that I wanted to come today is to remind you all of what Dane by Local is and to utilize whatever we can or partner however we can, but secondly, to make you aware of this other organization, Dane County Food Collective. The mission here is an organization of individual and industry leaders and individuals working together to create a stronger food system in Dane County. United by this mission, we address systematic issues through advocacy, resource sharing, and collective action. There is no cost to this organization. It's now becoming a nonprofit. We literally kept the word collective in it because it's a collective of people from all over. So we have psychiatrists in our group, we have yoga instructors, we have business owners, we have dishwashers, it doesn't matter. If you have an investment or an interest in what's going to happen in the future of the food systems in Dane County and the surrounding areas, you're welcome to be part of it. You're welcome to give ideas on what needs to be improved, ideas of how systems can be changed. So it's just a very open opportunity, but because it's a collective and it's not an entity of anything else, it's been very effective in getting change quickly. It's a way of mobilizing issues that's working very, very well. So our top 3 issues right now are advocacy, which is the top one there. And this can look like anything, but currently it is a lot about policy and systems, like the Healthy Food for All. That's something that our restaurants and our farmers are really concerned about. They want their produce in the school systems, and they understand how many barriers are in the way to making that happen. Many farmers don't want to be charging a barrier fee, but they have their cost to produce. So how do we eliminate some of those barriers? Restaurants want to be part of food systems. If they can help distribute meals, help be part of that process, they want to. So they're working collectively with other organizations. The Healthy Food for All is its own mission. So when they have a rally, they can contact Dane County Food Collective and we show up. It's a mobilization, again, of people who have a vested interest. It's a communication tool. I would say health and wellness is right now, probably our most thriving area. And it's really underestimated by so many people that the tax that food systems has on a person's mental health. It is a very undervalued career choice. And there's a lot of abuse in the system. There's a lot of toxicity. oftentimes the work leads to addiction, it leads to abuse, it leads to burnout. So the health and wellness piece is part of a longer systematic view of rebranding what food systems is as a career, and that it could be a good choice for your future. So we provide many options. Twice a week we have free fitness classes for anybody to participate in. You don't even have to identify as being in the food systems. Again, as long as you're supportive of it. And those are very successful, and we continue to find different ways, and that will continue to grow as we grow. We've done 10-week sessions, we've done open calls, whatever works for people. We also have what's called Sunday Meets, which is where once a month on Sundays, anyone can come and gather, and it's more of a support group. People share like what it's like to be a business owner or a manager of staff or dealing with mental health issues in your employees. So that's an opportunity for people just to, in a safe environment, talk about that. And lastly, in health and wellness, actually there's two things. One is the insurance, which we'll get to later. We work on insurance options, different options for employers. And then lastly, there's, I'm sure you're probably familiar with, but there's a peer support certification within the state of Wisconsin and most states. It focuses on mental health support. And so it's a base level, 40 hours of training to become a peer specialist in mental health. Wisconsin is doing a mental health and recovery specific peer certification. And we have received a grant, and we have 17 people in the Madison food systems, starting in the fall to get the certification. So the next step for that, once it's complete, is there'll be a cohort kind of embedded in the restaurant and the food systems in Madison. So, like, I'm trying to think of a restaurant right by us, but Julio or something. If there's an employee at Julio and Me, and they're having a mental health issue on the job, or if somebody in the back of the house is having an issue with their recovery, rather than firing them, rather than calling the police, rather than bringing in a higher level, you could contact someone from the cohort, and the peer specialist would come to your location and advise the employer, but also advise the employee. So that's a very successful program that's already exists, and we're just participating in it. And lastly, buying collectives. We work to figure out what is the most efficient way to overcome some of those barriers, which there's a lot of answers to it, and we can get to that in the next part. One of their first successes was some of the local kitchen supply distributors have agreed to have just one rate. So if you're a one-person food truck, you can get the fryer you need at the same cost as a large organization who gets to pay lower fees because they're maybe buying 5 fryers or whatever. So there's a buying collective reduction that comes with that. And so we have been working on that in many areas as far as storage, transportation, shipping, and that's our first success. That's a hard one. So that's always going on. This is a little out of order, but I wanted to insert it because it's pretty cool. And we did an economic study recently, and we find this to be true, and it's actually changed over the years. It's gotten a little more significant. On the left, you'll see this is the return on money locally versus like big box stores. So you'll see that national chains, whatever we spend locally at a national chain comes back to our community in 13.6%. However, independent retail shops, and you can see there's a little bit of a breakdown of what that looks like, and they explain where that money's going. And when they say it's coming back to the community, it's not, it breaks down. But 47.4% is pretty significant comparative to 13.6. On the right, we have restaurants. And so that's an even more, I think, again, we talk about people underestimating how much the foundation of our economy sits on top of food. And this graph really shows it. But 30%, if it's a national chain, comes back to the community versus 60.7%. And so to us, it's really, really essential to be supporting local because this provides for programs the city is going to host. This provides for the nonprofits locally. If this money is coming back to us, we have that much more to work with. And then this is just, I'm Joyce had asked me to put together some perspectives from our businesses, things that they're dealing with on a regular basis. We have 29 businesses within the Fitchburg area, and I contacted them, so this comes from some of their feedback as well. The first thing I did add, just for your resource, is a pandemic food study. If you haven't seen this, it was done, gives you a really good insight to, the pandemic showed us where all the gaps were in distribution of food and where all, like, the areas that need to be improved. So if you have any interest in, it's long, but it's valuable. So I just threw that in here. And then this is the general struggles. I tried to break it down pretty efficiently, but it's very long. You don't have to, we'll have to go through them all. Healthcare, that's a need for everybody. Most of our local businesses can't afford to pay health insurance on top of a wage. So that's a real struggle. So many, in particular in Fitchburg, this came up. Several businesses in Fitchburg brought to our attention, like, we're at a place, because the community does well, that we can support our employees by paying them a living wage and health insurance. But that means us as owners and managers, we're on Badger Care, or we don't have any insurance. So those are choices they're having to make. And so, and actually one of them went even further and said, if anything can be changed, would be the shame of being on Badger Care. I'm a successful business person. I choose to be on Badger Care so I can support my employees. Why does it have to feel like I'm on Badger Care? Why does it have to be a sad thing or a bad thing? So that was kind of an interesting note as well. Not that that's something that is within all of our reach, but I think it's an interesting note. Paid leave. I think we work with businesses whose values are how to take care of their employees. And so to not be able to provide paid leave is really a burden on them, a stress. So that's another one of the advocacy things we do at the capital level and at the state level. We've been working on that. Competitive wages to big box stores. That's a whole systematic change. Signing bonuses is making it very difficult and some of them are locally, like statewide organizations. It's a great idea. It's not sustainable. It's not maintainable. That money is not going to be around forever, so it's not a model that works for our smaller businesses. The lack of workers, I think you're all familiar with that, but the work that we do at Dane by Local, we're finding that the lack of workers comes from that there are the workforce development programs there. The knowledge and access to them is right now one of the barriers. The workforce accelerator programs are there, but the communication, the knowledge and access is where the gaps are. And then one thing I see very intimately is this long-term financial detrimental cycle of using, I'm just going to throw Indeed out there. It's not a great idea, but for example, Indeed. I need 5 employees fast. I post on Indeed. I need a dishwasher. Well, the quality of person you post when you get a dishwasher off of Indeed is not what you want. So, okay, well, I'm going to say a dishwasher that has some experience. So you get in this cycle of refining and refining and refining the post till you get to the point that, what am I asking for? A college-educated person to wash a dish. And now you've spent all this time and investment in Indeed or any other program like that, and you're spending so much money hiring, firing, letting go, or they just don't show up to work. You're restarting constantly. So I think that's where some really good education and outreach, the more businesses know that there are organizations doing this for them or how to ask or how different ways to go out there. I don't think that hiring apps should go away. I don't mean that at all. I just think that for smaller businesses, it's creating a huge tax on their finances and their time. Mentioned earlier, poor brand recognition. Food, maintenance, healthcare, childcare, and public services are seen as jobs, potentially dead-end jobs. They're not careers very much anymore. My husband and I were having this conversation the other day, and he said, well, how can you convince somebody that a dishwasher is a career? I think that this is a pipe dream. And it was like, well, if I remember when I was younger, if you started as a dishwasher, there was usually, okay, you start as a dishwasher, but if you can do this and you can do it well, you're going to then move to the front of house. And if you can move to the front of house, that doesn't exist anymore because people are so desperate. And that is a struggle. And so, and that cycle that I was talking about before is creating this revolving door of bad jobs. Or I can know if once I get to be a good dishwasher, I can get $1 more if I switch to a chain. And that doesn't, that's okay to them. But for the local businesses, That's not what we're looking for. So is anything in the community that we can do to help build up the idea that these are careers and to educate our employers that there's a way to get in there as an employer and educate and nourish back to our peer specialists. That's one of the things that we would offer. We're telling everybody mental health is now an acceptable thing. Everybody should, you should be accepting, you should hire people even if they're reentering the workforce or they're in recovery or they have a mental health issue. But that's great. But behind here is where's the education for all the employers that are expected to take on people with these needs where they never had it before. Peer specialists for us would be an opportunity for us to get in there and help with that. Dane by Local, we work on that. Dane County Food Collective, we work on that, helping educate employers about how to better treat their employees. That whole kind of systematically rebranding in the long run. Platform for activism. And this is happening a lot in Madison and it's super exciting. So I don't know if it needs to be much time, but art, events, speech, writing, events is becoming really popular again. So I don't know if that's as relevant, but the opportunity for employees to feel like they have a voice will only help with that long-term goal. Lack of infrastructure and communication. That's exactly what I was saying, but also to get to the underserved areas. If we're not even getting it in, a block from a workforce development center, people don't know about it. It's hard to think that how is that information getting out to these other areas. And then I'm not going to go through these as much because these are more finite issues, but disparities in technology. Translation, I think something really interesting to think about if you haven't already is we have a lot of workforce development agencies working on teaching a basic level of ESL. Okay, you're going to learn this. We're going to give you a set of tools. You're going to pass this basic level of speaking English. You can get into these jobs. But once they get to the jobs, it's kind of like the mental health issue. At the job, there's nobody that has that skill set of being bilingual. So as we advance, finding a place for part-time or a contract person that can be a communication tool for businesses so that people can transition from a basic level of English speaking from as a dishwasher up to a manager or in a call center, getting to the point that they can be a successful, setting them up for success. I think that's a long-term goal we should be including in our thought process. And these are things that a lot of people can't even think about. Equity in sourcing. Where are we getting our supplies from? Are we sourcing equitably? Are we valuing that? So many of our businesses want to be thinking that, but they can't. And I did reference Fitchburg, and this came from my visit to your meeting and this is something that you can't solve yourself, but has to be aware of, the lack of affordable housing. Many businesses are expanding, they're developing, and they're gonna bring in hundreds of jobs that the people that are gonna have in holding those jobs can't live locally. So what does that look like? How are they gonna get in from Brooklyn or Belleville, where they can maybe afford to live? How are they gonna get to Fitchburg for that job? And then once Fitchburg or Belleville and Brooklyn get built up, that's the mindset is where's the end to this, and how do we help systematically work on that? Lastly, let's see, these are ones I've covered already, but they're just a little more intimate. These are really specific. And then at the end, positive reflections I wanted to add was something that I use as a kind of a model. It came from one of our larger members of Dane by Local, who was saying, I want to support my competitor. I would love to have us all being on the same playing field, because if they're profitable, that means restaurants they're able to choose more than one distributor for produce, and specifically in this situation is produce. If they're profitable, then we're profitable. And I think that mindset is really key to Dane by Local. It's key to Dane County Food Collective, and I think that's going to evolve change, is the idea that we're not competitive, that we're collaborating. I think that helps a lot at the level that I work at in the more kind of grassroots small businesses. And then two of the Fitchburg businesses I talked to referenced how much they appreciate having 2 alderpersons per district with the staggered nominations or elections. I thought that was, I don't know if you hear that, but that was they were very grateful for that resource and that opportunity, because they felt like that constantly gives them a voice. Like, well, maybe right now this cycle is hard, but I know there's someone else that was hired in a different cycle as pendulum swings, or I know that there's a next coming up, there's another option. I'm going to skip this stuff because we've pretty much talked about it. One of the education needs I think is really important is there's a big movement towards cooperatives and unions. You may be aware of it, I'm not going to assume you don't, but there is a lot of resources out there right now thinking rather than reacting to all the problems, let's go out and educate on how valuable a cooperative is, how valuable a union is, and making your employees your partners and having open books so they can see, oh, well, there's not really any money to pay me, so I can't have a temper tantrum over this, or I'm not going to quit and go somewhere else because you don't have the money and I see that. But we can raise money, we can get more money by fill in the blank, whatever it would be. Another huge education need is website development, maintenance, and SEO. SEO is a huge issue for businesses. I don't know if over and over and over again, that's our number one request. I have no idea. I paid somebody to get my website set up. They left. Now I'm struggling. I don't know what's going on. I have my next steps listed. I would love for them to be just even glanced over, but the biggest thing for me is communication portals that I would suggest utilizing our chambers, our neighborhood associations, our professional associations, social media to get out the word that this stuff is happening. And I think when Joyce and I were talking previously, and what I hear a lot from people is, everyone's bringing us all these problems and we can't solve it. We have no more resources, staff-wise, we have no more money, we have no more time. We can't solve these problems ourselves. And I think keeping in mind that you don't have to solve the problems, that there are all these organizations out there doing it, and seeing ourselves in these broader as resource directors rather than problem solvers. We're not the solution, we're the collaboration or the resource to the solution. Because that cutting down on the redundancy and bringing up the level of communication would be great. Last page, I just listed a bunch of resources. If you wanted to look more into the Dane County Food Collective, there's our executive committee there. It's a pretty cool group of people with some business owners. We have 2 chefs, some from REAP. We do have some fiscal support from REAP so that NOAA here can manage administrative issues. The Worker Justice, they're doing a lot of the education on unions and cooperatives. They have a cooperative incubator if you're not familiar with it. So I think that's a really amazing resource. I listed Frida down here. She's part of the Worker Justice organization. Charity Schmidt on campus, she can't help in Fitchburg, but she could resource you to who does do the cooperative works in Fitchburg. And then these are the constant feeders I use for workforce development. And I also work the Dane County School Consortium. That's a really heavy lean for me. I work a lot in the schools, particularly in schools that are in alternative education programs where the kids have more freedom of schedules and they have more investment in what's next for me. And we can walk that path with them to get to the next step. So I will oftentimes set up apprenticeships. I feed the Dane County School Consortium businesses who really want to work with young people. The Latino Academy is doing amazing things. So these are things, Black Men Coalition of Dane County, really specific targeted. There's a lot of, each of these has their own thing that they do very, very well, and that's why they're on our top list. So that was a lot, I'm sorry. I'm very passionate about this, and I don't know how to sum it up very easily, so. And you said that we'll cut you off if we need to cut you off, so I'm cutting myself off. Any questions, thoughts, frustrations?
In the very beginning, you talked about barriers that the farmers had. What barriers are you talking about?
Well, there's a couple different farming situations going on right now. There's a lot of young people starting farms, and this idea, I'm going to make a living off of planting just rutabagas. And I'm going to have, circling harvests, and, they have a very specific approach to doing it, but they can't support a whole farm on rutabagas, for example. So there's some education and utilizing like joining resources, like what else can you farm? Or should you be farming for production versus farming with the hope of selling? Because the idea of planting, lines and lines or fields of crops that they're hoping they would sell at maybe a farmer's market that will end up going to waste. How can you target your audience? That's on a very small scale. A big scale, it's getting the product from the farm to local restaurants, the farm to a local distributor. There's a lot of boundaries for our farmers on the care, the handling, the food handling, the kind of the tracking of the food from leaving the farm to the distributor who can then get it into the restaurant. So that, and there's also a lot of there's a lot of finance, right? So I need to pay for somebody to drive my produce here. I need to pay the distributor to distribute it. We're paying extra on this end. So now it becomes a barrier for the restaurant to buy locally produced produce. And there's a barrier for the farm. I can't afford to grow these crops because I can't afford to even get them into the system. So how do we, and this isn't true for everybody. There's some farms that have been doing it for years and doing it very successfully, but it's not enough for what our community wants and needs, and there's so many farms out there. There's a lot of Hmong culture farms, there's a lot of Black-owned farms, and they're just not even part of the system at all. So they're not even on the route. If there was a route to be chosen for distributors, they're not even on the route, they're not even on the radar. So the biggest barrier of all, I would say, and I didn't mention it, but it's in here, is like a terminal market or storage. For example, I know a farmer in Mount Horeb who does just pigs. So she works on a client-to-client basis. It's enough for her to make a living off it to supply some for the local restaurants. She had clients come to her and say, we're going to foreshadow that we're going to need this many. Well, in the end, they didn't need that many. So come at the end of May, she had to butcher pigs she didn't need to butcher. What does she do with that? She either has to rapidly find clients or she could put them in cold storage. But there's no cold storage available to a small farmer in Mount Horeb. And the food storage it could be its own presentation in itself. Mild production is also, so let's say I do produce rutabagas and I do it really, really well and people actually want my rutabagas. I can drive my own truck to Madison. What am I gonna do with them when I get there? There has to be some sort of basic production line, getting them off, getting them cleaned and getting the roots and everything off of it. Who's doing that is the next step. And there's FDA barriers in a lot of those places. So there is a lot. So this concept of a terminal market is really good for you guys to be aware of. It's really I would guess in the next 5 years, there's going to be at least one being created in Madison. And it's going to be a massive space where it'll be collective and nonprofit. But there'll be freezer storage, cold storage, and mild production on site because there's just no other answer but that. There are a few storage places that are locally here are either too overpriced or too full, or the regulation of, like if they're freezer, there's just the regulation issue of what that particular product needs. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
I went all over the board about it. So one of the things that we do through Dane County Food Collective is we work to contact as many farms as we can and get them on the same network. There's a wholesale readiness program that REAP is running. So like maybe a Hmong farmer who doesn't have technology and doesn't speak English, they go out to them and teach them how to use this, like put their produce into this application. They each day, maybe I produced this many heads of lettuce. I put that into the account. A restaurant can go onto the wholesale ready platform and go, I need this many heads of lettuce. I'm going to get it from this farm, this farm, this farm. So those are happening. They're just not connected yet very well. So I think that would be another huge barrier is like, I don't know how to sell. I know how to sell to my neighbors, or I know how to sell to maybe a local market or a farmer's market. I don't know how to get my product to the next step. Do you have a specific question? I might know the answer.
No, you've explained barriers very well.
Okay.
Just an observation. I think that, again, this is a great presentation, so thank you, but I'm not going on. those are some huge issues. So
Yeah.
you look at your priority, what you just explained to Dan is one aspect of it.
Yep,
But as we look at our businesses in Fitchburg and how we can help them,
yep,
because that's got to be our first focus.
yep.
There's also this unspoken competition between Madison and Middleton and
Right.
Fitchburg and Sun Prairie. How do we, as a committee, help you guys? Which ones are the biggest issues? Is it the people? Is it the food, as you talked about, the mental health? I mean, you've also just got that brand-new thing that opened up on Training Center, just opened up on Verona Road for
Yep.
construction. But that's not what I'm seeing you mention here, which is, that's okay. I think they've got that going.
Right.
But what can we do to help this and our businesses?
Yeah, I
And new
think,
businesses that may come to town?
I think priority-wise, I think that the cultural change, like you just said, Middleton, Madison, Fitchburg, like that cultural change, I think if as a city level, you could focus on one thing, it would be a cultural change, a view change. That the competition is what's probably crushing a lot of these networks from actually being fulfilled. A boundary of Madison versus Fitchburg shouldn't be the thing that keeps a business, a development center from being able to share resources. So I guess ultimately, and that goes back, like every one of these issues, they're all large, but if you whittle them down, the main source of all of them is a value system or a view of how it should be, right? So I think at your level, there's people doing all the little nitty gritty work. And I think part of it was I wanted you guys to know that all this stuff is happening and all the needs are out there, but you don't have to solve them all as long as you're aware. And then you're thinking, okay, if this stuff is happening, there's a cultural change that needs to happen. Fitchburg is part of a much larger community. Your numbers represent probably the vision of what everybody else wants. Your demographics, right? Your crime, your LGBTQ, your veterans, they are across the board like, oh, this is like a shining example of what we all want to be. Why can't, like, think of that as like, wow, that'd be great. How can we spread that, or how can we be more inclusive so that we're not like, and I'm not saying you are, but that's the example that we're talking about. Like Middleton too, they hold themselves in a very, very high regard, and they are very kind of limiting sometimes in what they're willing to share and what they're willing to do. Like collectively, if that model could change, I think that's a big part of it, is being able to be open and sharing resources. Back to the communication. If we all share the tools that are out there, it'd be much more effective. Yeah, but I do think that housing is probably baseline. Housing and bringing in like wages. That's just, it has to start with, that's a value of life issue that will help the culture, it will help everything. And then unfortunately, then you have to go back and go, well, how can we do that? And you don't have to do that. It's already happening, but you just need to understand how it's happening so that you can support. When businesses call you and say, I think I told Joyce, but like Latino Academy, they have people call them regularly and just say, we need a bunch of construction workers, and we heard that Mexicans are hard workers. Can you send some over? Like, that's a communication or a cultural thing, right? And so, like, if we can change that value, and that Latino Academy is seen by Fitchburg, City of Fitchburg, and the state, and MG&E as a resource, like, oh, we're going to get some really good, they're training people in green technology. So they're getting ahead of it and going, this is going to be a big boom. Let's get our people trained now so that when the need's there, we have a whole workforce ready to be deployed. Seeing them as not a bunch of like Mexicans who are hard workers, and seeing them as resources that everybody has access to would be great. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
So has like Yelp and things like that, has that been a positive or a negative for small business? Because you always see these reviews, and I mean, I feel like sometimes social media, people take their grievances out there.
Yep.
And I mean, that goes a long way. What are you seeing and hearing from the people you work with, and what can they do?
I rarely hear that as a concern. Honestly, it's just, it's rarely a concern. If you ask them specifically, they'll be like, oh, it's brutal. And they just have to have extra time to be able to monitor it. And the businesses that aren't answering are the ones that are the most affected. So if there's a bad review, if the person on the other end, there's not someone to receive that review and respond and say, oh, I'm really sorry you had that experience. What can we do to make that better? If there's an unanswered, terrible review, that's where a lot of the damage comes, because a lot of them aren't even real. A lot of them are made out of anger from a past employee. There's a lot of misreviews, and so if there's not somebody there to answer, which is very, very difficult. If you're a small business, you gotta get your groceries, you gotta make the food, you gotta pay the bills, you gotta take care of your kids, and then you're supposed to go home and read all the Yelp reviews and answer them. It's a pretty fruitless, so I think for them, it's low on the priority list. But I also don't hear it very often as like, this is really hard for me. That may be I'm just out of touch with that, but I just haven't heard it at all.
Were there any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for being out here. And as you mentioned, your contact information is in the presentation, so please, if people have additional questions, I assume feel free to contact.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We love to talk with people, and if it leads to membership, that's great, but that's not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is the local economy. Our membership prices are often very, very reasonable, or we do trade. So the other thing we encourage between businesses is trade resources. You're not great at marketing. I'm not great at fixing toilets. Let's swap resources. So if you can refer people to us, if you think that would be a great resource, we would love that. We would love to be able to support your businesses as much as we can.
All right, great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is hotel room tax report considerations.
I'll take that one. We don't have any considerations, but just wanted to give you an update on the hotel room tax report. The second quarter numbers are in. It hasn't all been collected yet, but we came in for the second quarter at $162,194, which is a 25% increase over the second quarter of 2022, which was the trend that we also saw in the first quarter. So if we continue on that and add in the third and fourth quarter of last year, we'd come in at about $537,000 for the total, and that would exceed our high year of 2019 before COVID we were at 525 there. So we're rebounding nicely on that, giving us some additional resources and everything. So we just wanted to at least give that good news and report on that. And thanks again for the authorization last month for some tickets for the White Party. That was a great event, great networking. Had a chance to see a lot of people and talk to a lot of people at that event at the McKenzie Regional Workforce Center. Impressive facility and initiative over there.
Okay, were there any questions for Mike on the hotel room tax report? Seeing none, item number 7 is announcements. Apparently Mike doesn't get to give an update this month, but if you have anything that qualifies as an announcement, go for it.
Yeah, let me give some announcement reports. Okay. We were limiting it because we wanted to give enough time to go visit General Beverage, but some updates for you on some things that we've been working on. As you know, we've got the 3 tax increment districts, the amendment to TID number 10, second amendment on North Fish Hatchery Road, TID 16 Southdale, and then TID 17 Anton Arrowhead. They were at the Plan Commission last week for a public hearing. All 3 got support and moved forward. So the next step in the process is they go to the council for consideration on August 8th, and then they go to the Joint Review Board for final consideration on August 31st, and then hopefully we get support, and those TID districts are in place to be something in our toolkit in each of those 3 respective neighborhoods that we have.
I do have a question regarding TID, since you brought it up. Last evening with the Committee of the Whole, Misty mentioned that the TID process is changing, or at least going forward. Has there been any discussion within your group and with city administrator and mayor of additional TIDs? She didn't encourage just for the sake of reaching out and creating TIDs, but do you see a need that maybe we need to jumpstart before that process change?
I think that came through Act 12, kind of late in the budget cycle
Right.
Here. And so we're just trying to get our arms around what does that actually mean. And I think we're just starting to have some internal conversations to say, are there some other strategic TIDs and geographic areas that we would want to have in place sometime next year in 2024
Sure.
to have them operate under the current model
Right.
of TIF and not the future model there. So I think we're just starting those conversations. We kind of want to get these 3 TIDs approved. That's been a heavy lift for us and a lot of work
Agreed.
this year. But then Misty, Chad, and I have already started just brainstorming on, are there some other areas that we should look at next year? Joyce will probably hit me when I say that, but there might be a couple more coming forward next year if we come up with strategic areas that need that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Can I continue on then, Andy? Okay. Our rent-to-own legal services, as you might remember, we had received a response from Quarles. That pre-approval now has been processed, so we're giving Quarles the green light to proceed with the legal services to identify the risks of operating a program like that and their recommendations for mitigation both for city and the and CETA going forward. So hopefully that progresses over the next couple of months, and then once that information is gathered from Quarles, then the plan is to go back to the council and the elected officials to say, here's the information that we gathered, the recommendations that they offered, and to see where the council wants to go next with that potential program. Again, that would be for the rent-to-own townhome program that we're developing. Then the 2024 budget, that season has already started. Our budgets were due on was it Tuesday night? So we've got ours submitted. As you know, the 100 fund, which is the traditional general revenue funded economic development, that's pretty much status quo. That hasn't changed in years as far as the line items there, just kind of a maintenance. But the 225 account, which is generated from the room tax dollars, the room tax projection that we're going with for 2024, even though we're probably going to come in at about 537 this year, we're going to use that high year of 2019 as kind of our benchmark for 2024 and go with a revenue projection of 525, just because I know there's some potential wins out there of are we going to have a recession, not have a recession. So we want to be kind of proactive on the room tax, but not be overly aggressive there. So we're going to base our numbers off of the 525 revenue figure. And then in the housing section, we've got some money identified. I think we mentioned in this group before in the Housing Advisory Group that we're working with Sustained Dane on an efficiency navigator program to look at some of those smaller, older multifamily buildings that maybe need building upgrades and efficiency upgrades. So we've got some of our TID for housing dollars that are allocated specifically for that purpose to contract with Sustained Dane for the Efficiency Navigator program. And then one thing that we have included in the budget as kind of a new proposal is a full-time position for a housing initiatives and finance specialist. We're spending more and more time on housing and a significant amount of time on housing-related issues. And as you heard Megan identify, that's become more and more of a priority now at the local level that we're supposed to be working on and coming up with solutions to help solve. And we just need additional capacity if that's going to be a top priority for this community. We're in the process right now of trying to develop 3 programs, which takes a significant amount of time and work in coordination with a lot of different entities. And we just need some additional capacity. If we're running multiple TIDs through and housing programs and everything, we're kind of at the end of our rope here, kind of keeping everything going forward and in place. So that is a position request that we have in to administration. Some upcoming events. There's a Biz After Hours on Wednesday, August 9th, 4 to 6 at the Delta Beer Lab. If you can join us for that. And then the last summer concert at McKee is on Monday, August 21st. There's going to be a Latino band for that one. And then the the cookie order didn't get delivered for the last concert series that the Chamber had organized, so the cookies in honor of the 40th anniversary are going to be at the August 21st concert. So please join us for that. And then in the CIP, we worked with the Parks Department and also with the Fitchburg Chamber to put in an item to look to expand our pickleball courts in McGaw Park. And the council just took up the CIP amendments this last Tuesday. There was no amendment to take that request out. So hopefully that continues to move forward so that we can look to do an expansion in 2024. And part of the reason for that is our Fitchburg Chamber Visitor Business Bureau, which is our local tourism entity, is hosting a local tournament coming up, I think it's August 17th, 18th, out at the existing pickleball courts. And if we're able to upgrade to get to 12 courts, that kind of positions us well for additional, more regional and larger tournaments that might be able to be hosted at McGaw, which then, of course, has a tourism impact with heads and beds and room tax dollars there. And Angela informed me that once we get the additional 4 courts in, this Fitchburg will have the most pickleball courts in one location within the region, which again is a competitive advantage from a tournament hosting standpoint there. So we appreciate the council's support for that through the CIP process, and hopefully that project moves forward next year. And I think that's everything on my list. Any questions from anybody on any projects or things? Or Joyce, you have anything you want to add?
So I've had a couple questions about the invite to do the neighborhood visits. And I just wanted to let you guys know that this is committee work that the Housing Advisory Committee is working on. We thought it might be good to include CETA on these visits, and the purpose is just to get a feel for these healthy neighborhoods. So we're going to go to Belmar, Jamestown, the first night with a quick questionnaire, and it's just going to be on kind of the housing stock and condition. There will be no discussions with property owners, residents, or anything like that. It's more or less for each committee member to kind of do, to fill out a questionnaire on their impression. We just want to affirm that where we're headed with our programming is actually reflective of the neighborhood. So just wanted to clarify that, that it's not a formal kind of meeting with residents or property owners. It's just going to be kind of, here's your questions, go take a walk.
I have a question. You sent out invites. Do you know offhand the first one off the top of your head? I'm just looking at my calendar. I just want to make certain that.
So the plan is on August 14th to do Jamestown and Belmar, meeting at the former Quick Trip. On, what is
Off
it?
Williamsburg Way.
Yeah, 5280, I believe is the
I do
address.
remember. I just want to make
And
certain.
then we'll head over to Belmar after we do that. And then the next one, we're going to do at our September meeting.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So it's not necessary for you to be there, but, you know, ultimately, they're going to come back to you with their findings, the Housing Advisory Committee, so we thought you might want to be versed in what's going on as well, so. And you do not have to walk. If you would prefer to take your car and just maybe drive around, you could do that too. If you plan to do that, just let me know. I'd like to inform the police department of your vehicle and your license plate number, just in case they get any calls. But that's it. Do you have anything to add, Mike?
All right. Well, if there are no other announcements, we can move on to item number 8, which is adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion by Randy,
Second.
second by Dan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.